The world is old and the powers are weary. The god at the door of night has fallen, and the great enemy of the world has come back from the timeless void. The shadow has awakened the great evils to regain dominion over Ardar. Darkness shall cover the land, if not with the deeds of a small fellowship of elf friends. Join the players of this Dungeons & Dragons campaign as they fulfill the events of the Dark or Daggeroth prophecy and strive with Morgoth on the plains of Valinor. Welcome to the Undying Lands in Part 3 of the Inglorion Bastards Trilogy, Trials of the Valar.
All right, welcome everybody to the very last Inglorion Bastards podcast episode. I'm kind of transitioning from that moniker to the long-winded one because I am transitioning now to a different set of stories. But tonight is a very special night, like any of the nights where I'm really excited to introduce somebody to you. You guys know how much I love the interviews. I'm very pleased to say tonight that we are sharing our last episode with Shawn Marchese and Sisto of the Prancing Pony Podcast. Welcome, you guys.
Thank you so much. Good to be here.
Thank you very much for having us. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, I think you guys need no introductions. Well, I would like to start with this.
Sure.
The Prancing Pony Podcast won the 2020 Tolkien Society Award for Best Online Content. Is that correct?
Right. That is correct, yes.
That is correct.
Congratulations, you guys.
Thank you.
It is so deserved. And I tell you why. Number one, you guys have one of the most polished shows out there. I mean, the overall, just the quality of it. And I think probably that comes from Alan. You're a voiceover artist?
I've done some voiceover work before. Yeah. I'd only been doing it for a few months prior to starting the podcast. And I think that shows in our first season's audio quality, but we did pick up some techniques along the way. So yeah.
I would add that it's just something that we've always felt strongly about since the very beginning. And, and when I say we, I mean primarily Alan, and he convinced me pretty quickly. but yeah, it was something that we knew that we wanted it to be something that was easy to listen to.
Yeah,
and so
exactly.
Shawn, you're a rock and roll connoisseur and in your spare time, a film producer, right?
I've done a little bit of indie film production. Yeah, that's correct. You can actually see one film that I co-produced is actually on cable at times. It's called Last Girl Standing, and that's a project that I was involved with a few years back. But yeah, I've done a little bit of indie film production, just kind of doing stuff on set. The kind of things that you do when you're just making a movie with a crew of like 12 people. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's not my day job, though. It's just one of many things I've done to fill the off hours,
which are now consumed by podcast creation.
Exactly. Yeah.
Totally. And we're creators, right? Like, I think probably you guys have that bug just like I do, right? Like that need to tell a story or to create something, something that, you can have the most rewarding job in the world. I work with kids. Yet there's that part of me that wants to sub-create.
Yeah.
So you guys got started podcasting in around 2016.
That's
right.
But you were involved in Tolkien long before that. Is that right?
I've been involved with Tolkien's work since I was 10, which I don't know, is about 130 years if I do my math right. And that's when I first discovered the Hobbit. I actually discovered it through the book of the Rankin and Bass animated film. I didn't see the film first. I read the book first, but it was with the illustrations from that. Yeah. And then I saw the film, and then, after that I read The Lord of the Rings and so on and so forth. But yeah, been involved with Tolkien's work since I can really barely remember.
As for myself, let's see. I first read Tolkien's work in 1991. I was
you had to go and put a year on it, Shawn. I mean, really? Really? Because if I had to put a year on it, what year that is. It's going to be 1978, and that really makes me feel old.
You did say Rankin Bass Hobbit, so I think people can find it.
That's true.
Oh, yes. Maybe we keep away from the years here. Although I did bring up 2016, so it's you can blame me for that.
Fair enough.
There you go. But no, I was 15 years old, I think, and I'd read a reference to the famous story about how Tolkien wrote in a hole in the ground, "There lived a hobbit" on the back of an exam paper that he was grading. And as a teenager, this was just like the coolest thing that I'd ever read. I was like,
Yeah.
You're it was like it's like an act of rebellion. You're supposed to be working and you're gonna slack off at work and you're gonna start writing a story. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. And so I bought a box set of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings and dove right in, and I never really left. I went straight on into the Silmarillion and Unfinished Tales. I didn't understand any of it, but I went straight on and read those, and then Book of Lost Tales, and I've been kind of playing around in Tolkien's world ever since.
The first time I picked up the Silmarillion, I wasn't quite sure what I was reading, but I knew that I loved it. I happened to be training for a marathon, and I just I consumed it on audiobook, and so I did.
The booming voice,
Yes, you did.
and the incorrect pronunciation of Ilúvatar.
Ilúvatar, the one.
So you guys, let's fast forward. You're in a Facebook group, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that where you met?
Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah, we were in a Facebook group that prided itself on at least having a small subset of people who were devoted to the books rather than to the films and memes and articles about actors and things. And I don't say that with any denigration, of course, but there was a corner of us that were interested in the books, and they had these book week posts, and they'd been going on for probably about a year, most of 2015. And Shawn and I had gone back and forth, writing these little articles. Basically, they went from short Facebook posts to longer articles to longer articles. We were sort of one-upping each other.
Essays with footnotes and like how many secondary sources can we reference in this? 2,000 word Facebook post.
It got a little out of hand. It was pretty fun.
Yeah.
And of course, people enjoyed reading our stuff, and they would engage with us on our threads, and we would engage with each other on the threads. And it was clear we were very like-minded. We saw the text in similar ways. And so one day,
I think we wrote them a lot like we talk on the show. I mean, it was
very much so.
It was very much like, I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to read this passage. I'm going to talk about something I like about it. I'm going to make a couple of really bad jokes, and then
or a rock reference or something, or a movie
and
quote.
then I'm going to move on, and it's just because that's how we talk.
This is actually we can come back to this, but I have to ask. So about the movie references, you guys have one of my favorite things to do is to create sort of punny, fun, witty titles for the podcast episodes.
Yes.
And you guys have some of the best titles. 'Tis a Silly Place, obviously Monty Python reference.
The Monty Python references.
A Whole New World, HOLE. Go West, Young Edine, right? So what are your sources of inspiration? I mean, I've caught Monty Python, Star Trek, Disney.
Yeah.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Rock and roll in general. I think for Lord of the Rings, we've mostly tended towards rock and roll references, and we'll try to keep it thematic. So we'll do, if we do 4 episodes on one chapter, we'll make them all Led Zeppelin songs.
Yeah. All the episodes on a chapter will tie in together, even if they don't tie in. Like, for example, we were on a Monty Python tear through most of second season, and we got to Beorn, and that's when we went on a Disney tear, on a specifically on
Bare Necessities from Jungle Book.
Yeah, we had Necessities and a few others. So, we'll keep all of those tied together, but sometimes it's a movie thing. I think we did Princess Bride for a while.
Yeah.
We've gotten references from obviously Monty Python and the Holy Grail, but other Monty Python sources as well. Yeah. And then, as Shawn said, lots and lots and lots of rock and roll inspired titles. Probably Rush is our biggest inspiration.
I think Rush is our biggest inspiration. We had a big tear of Led Zeppelin references earlier this season.
Council of Elrond, I think, or maybe it was the next chapter. I don't remember.
Yeah. But I mean, it just, whatever. Styx, Pink Floyd,
I didn't catch the Styx reference, but
we had a handful of Styx titles a few episodes ago. That was
it wasn't too far back. We had the series of Sting and Police references in the middle of The Hobbit as well. And
that was literally just because Bilbo named the sword Sting in that chapter. So we're like,
and we had all the Gordon Sumner jokes.
Let's do some Sting references,
That's perfect.
And that's kind of how it happens.
So what about that other thing that you do at the very beginning of your episode where the Bob to my knob, the William to my Bert? What is all that about?
Well, you'll notice if you listen to more recent episodes, we've gone away from that because I think we ran out of things.
We ran out of good ideas. I think it started with So I was the Lord of the Mark, and Alan was the Man of the West. Those titles just sort of fit. As
Yeah.
soon as we started the podcast, we realized that those titles fit us very well for reasons that we discussed in episode 1. But
Correct.
I think it kind of started with, well, if I'm the Lord of the Mark and he's the Man of the West, well, I guess he's the Aragorn to my Éomer.
Right.
And so it
That's where it
started
began.
there. And then we got bored with that quickly. So
Yeah,
it started
I
getting
did that for
into
about a half dozen episodes. Then it became the Bob to my knob, or
the Tolkas to my Orome, and then it just started getting really weird,
got
like
silly.
the hammer and tongs to my smash crack. It was just
Oh
like,
my god.
all right, we got to come up with a new shtick. And
So
we did.
we eventually came up with something entirely different, which was just to take book quotes, references from that particular reading, and we would then reference that.
And the truth is, it's we have fun with the text. We take Tolkien very seriously. We love these books, and we love diving deeply into them, and we always take the story seriously.
Yeah.
But we like to have fun while we're talking about it, and so that's where this all comes from. It's like, if there's something as we're reading the text that we think, oh, that'll be a funny thing to reference in the beginning, let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember you guys talking about how you kind of, over the course of the first few episodes, you guys really found your groove, right? And really, and sort of incorporating like more humor. And
I think we weren't sure how funny we could be. Like, not how funny we could. Like, I think we both, think of each other as funny guys. But I think it's like, how much can we get away with in terms of like making, being silly on the show?
That's the thing. I think we were both a little nervous about how funny we could be, and it was probably somewhere between episode 8 and 12 that we finally started kind of breaking loose a little bit. And it took us, I think, that long just to get used to each other's on air, if you want to say it, on air personas, and sort of find our role. Like how are we going to interact with each other? Not just how would we interact with the text?
Yeah. And so how have you sort of delineated the roles on the podcast?
It's taken some time, but clearly, even though I'm sort of I mean, I say I was the initiator, meaning I just reached out to Shawn and said, hey, you want to do this? I mean, other than that, it's been, both of us all the time. But when I started it, I kind of saw myself as, it's my show and Shawn's my co-host, but that took like an episode and a half before I realized that wasn't going to work. We're definitely partners. And now I realize I'm the comic relief. Shawn's the word nerd, and I'm the dorky comic relief who comes in and says the inappropriate comments here and there.
Well, those are the people you need on the podcast, Alan. I'm telling you.
That's what makes it fun. I think. Yeah, I'm always gonna. I have a tendency to just do these long, drawn-out explanations of something, and Alan will just cut through it, because otherwise people are just going to fall asleep. I know it's interesting, but still,
there's only so much. It's fascinating.
It is, but still, Alan will just cut through it with the perfect joke, and we crack each other up, and we figure if we're cracking each other up, then somebody else is going to like it out there.
It's true, because we don't actually. So many of our funny references are totally off notes. I mean, we have notes. Anybody who does a podcast has some notes when they're going in.
Sure.
And ours is primarily, hey, this is the opening reference we'll make. Here's what our intro segment's going to be about. And then here are our outline points with maybe some discussion things, quotes from secondary sources, so we have them handy. But all these really funny things, 98% of them, totally off the cuff, totally random, especially music references and movie references. Yeah.
And sometimes I think Alan just spends my readings waiting to make a joke, like thinking about the perfect joke to make.
Yes,
like,
I do.
I'm thinking back to, was it the Kirion and Eorl?
Oh gosh, reading? Yes, on the Tolkien Reading Day a couple seasons ago.
And it's like this really,
intense, I mean, half an hour really reading of Kirion and Eorl.
Intense reading, and then Alan cuts through at the end with the Kansas reference of Kirion, my wayward son. And it just came out of nowhere, and it just kills me. Yeah.
So I'm looking at like, from 2016 on. I mean, there's over 100 episodes at this point.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So if someone were, I'm going to pretend that they have never listened to the Prancing Pony podcast, and if somebody was coming to your podcast for the first time, would you say start at the beginning?
Well, you listen to the show, so our next line is start at the very beginning, because it's a very good place to start. But, and I think Shawn's going to say this as well, not necessarily. You could start at the beginning of season 2 if you wanted to start with The Hobbit instead. I think that'd be perfectly fine. Or even start with season 3, episode 1, if you wanted to dive into Lord of the Rings. Yeah,
I mean, I think the important thing to know is season 1, we did the Silmarillion. And And we did that for a reason. We wanted to make sure that we called out specific themes from the Silmarillion, and it was a text we'd been talking about a lot. We knew it was the place we wanted to start, and we knew we wanted to use the knowledge of the Silmarillion to inform The Hobbit
Yes.
and Lord of the Rings rather than the other way around.
To illuminate it. Exactly.
And that's why we did it that way. But
Yep.
if you're, if you haven't read the Silmarillion before, well, first of all, if you haven't read the Silmarillion before, our season 1 is actually a pretty good way to get, kind of through all the jargon and all the names
We've
and all that stuff
gotten
that tends to scare people away.
We've gotten emails from a lot of people who've said, you guys are the secret sauce. We finally made it through the Silmarillion because of you.
Yeah.
We get that a lot. And
Yeah.
it's a high honor. We're super grateful that we've been able
Absolutely.
to help people.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're not interested in the Silmarillion, maybe start with
Yeah.
episode 1 and 2, because we touch on fairy stories and mythopoeia, both of which are very important. But then you can jump to The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings. Mhm.
Yeah, I definitely think those first 2 episodes, even though they were our first 2 episodes,
And they
and
are
that shows.
correspondingly a little rough. Yeah.
Yeah, but still, the content is there, and we
Yes.
really wanted to focus on some of the thematic stuff from Tolkien's essay on fairy stories and his poem Mythopoeia, which is exactly what we did in those 2 episodes.
Yeah.
I've heard you guys say that before, that the first couple episodes are rough, but I got to be honest, they're not that rough. They're really good, and
thank you.
and what you just touched on is in particular why I asked you guys to come on the podcast tonight, because after we get to know you a little bit more, one of the things we're going to do tonight is to sort of dissect some of the early manuscripts of the Second Prophecy of Mandos.
Great.
Excellent.
So we can talk a little bit about that, because it's one of the things that I most love about your show is when you really get into the text. First of all, you read the text really well, but then the discussion afterwards is spot on. But I have a few more questions for you. So I have to ask, because I've been doing this now for a couple of years, and I know when I first started, and I realized, I really want to have some of these Tolkien scholars on the podcast. Were there any moments when you had the Verlin Fleegers or the Tom Shippies that you thought, oh my gosh, this is Tom Shippey?
Every single time. Every single time.
Yeah, every single time. Yeah.
I think when we first, here's the thing with the guests. When we first started, we never even thought about it. We never even thought someday we'll interview people. What happened was, after episode 10, which was our first sort of special, it was on death being the gift to men, we had Andy Higgins reach out to us, who co-authored A Secret Vice with Dr. Dimitri Fimi. And he reached out to us and talked about, this book of theirs that was coming out, or that had just come out, and could they appear on our show?
Wow.
Could have knocked us over with a feather. We're like, could you? Yes,
could
you
you?
could.
Absolutely, please. Yes.
And
Don't
then, of course,
twice. Yeah.
it went really well, and we loved talking to them both. And, it was just an amazing experience.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, we realized, wow, we can do this.
Yeah.
And we got some ideas of some few people to reach out to.
But Simon Tolkien, I think, was the second.
That was the next one. Right? And I have to tell you, that was the one I was most afraid of.
Yeah.
Because he is a Tolkien. So it was really terrifying.
This is J.R.R. Tolkien's grandson, Christopher Tolkien's son.
Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah, that was
intimidating.
That was pretty cool. And it was quite intimidating. But
he was a very nice man. But
he had just written a book that was actually quite relevant to fans of
World
Tolkien.
War
It was about World War I. And
exactly.
We read it. It was a good book. We talked to him about it. And we talked a little bit about his grandfather. And it came out great. Yeah.
Yeah. And from there, it's sort of exploded, right? I mean, that's when we were like, well, maybe Corey Olsen would be kind enough to join us, and maybe Michael Drought and John Garth, and sure enough, all of them were. And that's when we decided we could maybe, reach out to even a Verlin Flieger or a Tom Shippey, which, that was a little scary, but
I think by the time we got Verlin Flieger on the show, which was the end of season 2, we had already heard that she was just the nicest person on earth. I think Michael Drought had said something about that in the episode.
And she proved that to be true.
He was on, and she proved that to be true. So we knew that she was going to be very nice, but still,
it's still Dr. Flieger. Yeah.
This is one of my all-time favorite Tolkien scholars. Splintered Light is my copy is, it's all dog-eared, and it's all I've flipped
notes
through
in
it
the margin.
it's an amazing book, and I've used it so much.
I have 2 copies of that book.
I believe it.
That's
Yeah.
smart.
Very
I'm not
smart.
sure how I ended up with 2 copies of that book, but they are very sweet. And Verlin's actually, I think I've told this story before, but she's the professor kind of like
Yeah.
that professor vibe. And I remember when it was the first time that I felt really self-conscious about my Inglorion Bastards title on my podcast.
You don't need to. We were on our last episode with her that just aired. Our episode 178, the very end of season 4, just released. And during that episode, she quoted the very famous Dyson quote, "Oh no, not another bleeping elf." But she didn't bleep it. We had to because we didn't want the explicit tag on Apple.
Oh yeah.
So yeah.
Oh no, she's great.
She is great.
She is
we just
great.
got to see her at Mythmoot, digital Mythmoot, of course, but it was fantastic. Her talk was great. And then she just released that book, Arthurian Voices, which, wow, there was a reading from that was just mind-blowing. Her writing is top-notch.
She has this amazing way of dropping bombshells on you that you read them and you realize that is so obvious. I can't believe I never thought about it.
And it changes
before.
your entire perspective. And she does it in a sentence.
Yeah.
She has this
absolutely.
incredible economy of words where she can just say so much in so little.
Yeah.
Like nobody else.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Flieger is going to come up again here when we start talking about the second prophecy of Mandos.
Okay.
But would you guys like to go with me on a little journey here? We're going to do, this is a tribute to the Prancing Pony. We're going to do a lightning round.
Like we do with our North Wing guests. Yes.
Yeah. So I have a few questions here for you that are relevant, but maybe a little off the wall. All right. Favorite age to discuss?
The first.
I think that was the easy question. I kind of knew that one going into this. All right, here we go. Starting to get a little harder. Which elven tribe do you most identify with?
Ooh. Teleri.
Yeah. Noldor.
Is it Teleri because you're a singer?
Teleri because I live on the coast.
Okay.
And because the Noldor are a bunch of kinslaying jerks.
Oh, ouch.
And because the Vanya are just like, OMG Manwë, and they don't do anything.
They don't do anything at all. They just sit around all day watching soap operas.
Well, we don't want to have any kinslaying here. We don't know kinslaying here. So agree to disagree on that one.
I have to go Noldor because even though they make mistakes, they're just so interesting when they make them.
They are. Of course they are. They're the whole history of Middle Earth. I mean,
they
really.
are. And when I say Noldor,
because I knew you were going to say Noldor.
And when I say, like, I'm not like Feanor, I'm like maybe like Finrod. I want to be a Finrod. Of
course. Finrod's awesome. He's my favorite elf of all time, right?
Exactly, yeah.
All right, next question. All right, so this is an interesting one. So you can kind of take it 2 different ways here. Choice of which character or timeline in the second age that you hope the Amazon series follows?
Am I first on this one?
Yes, you are. Have fun.
Man. Ar-Pharazôn. I really want to see the fall of Numenor, and I just want to see what they do with Ar-Pharazôn.
The Great Armament?
Yeah. I mean, I really would like to see that, but I hope they start early enough that we see when they were good. So I'm going to say Tar Palantir.
Oh, there you go.
I could have sworn one of you would have said Aldarion.
That's a good story. I
love the story of Aldarion and Arendis. I think it's great, and you could do a whole season on that story. It's just hard to fit it into the context because it doesn't connect to the larger arches.
I thought maybe that's what Amazon would like. The fact that they had a little more freedom in their story.
A little more freedom.
See, what I think they're going to like about Ar-Pharazôn is they can make it really dramatic. They can really make a soap opera of it.
Super dark. I mean, you're going to get like devil worship out of this stuff.
Now I'm not talking about like how much I want to see that stuff. I want to see like Ar-Pharazôn, like the character study. I think it's
I do too. I do too. I'm just saying that if you're Amazon and you're thinking about how much money you're spending on making Lord of Rings / Game of Thrones, then what better way than to have Sauron, human sacrifice. Yeah. And then the lightning slaying people in the streets. And then I actually am looking forward to the moment where Ar-Pharazôn steps on the steps on the Undying Lands and basically says, "Oh shit."
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you're gonna have to edit that, but like
No, the mountains are coming down.
I screwed up, man.
I was thinking of like the Hagrid thing from Harry Potter, like, oh, you shouldn't have done that.
I shouldn't have done that. I love that. That is great. That is great. Yeah, that's going to be the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Man.
Well, those I referred to them in the lay that we're going to play later tonight as the Golden Army. So they will. Our Farazan will make an appearance in the lay tonight.
Yes, he will.
All right, next question. Last or most memorable Dungeons and Dragons character?
Oh goodness! Well, my most memorable Dungeons and Dragons character is literally a character whose name escapes me because it's been so long since I played him. But I never played anything other. I was always a paladin. I'm always that's who I am. I have a real hard time playing against type. And I've always been this lawful good, sword and board, healing hands, detect evil paladin. That's just who I play. And that's why it's memorable, because I've never really played anything else. If I played again, I wouldn't play him. I would play somebody a little more fun.
Yeah.
A little more, freedom.
In the 1980s, Gary Gygax wrote a series of novels about a thief character named Gord the Rogue. I don't know if anybody out there has read those or remembers them at all, but I read those books when I was a kid, and I loved them so much that my next character that I rolled after I read those books basically just ripped that character off. So it was a true neutral thief. He only dressed in gray and black. I figured out a way to make him shapeshift into like a panther or whatever it was. Like, it was all kinds of. I basically just totally ripped that character off.
Was that in the Greyhawk? Was that Greyhawk campaign?
It did. Adventure? It started with the Greyhawk adventures. Yes,
okay.
Very perceptive.
That's probably why I ended up not being very familiar with it, because almost everything I did was Forgotten Realms. So
yeah,
I didn't.
Right. So and he wrote 2 books in the Greyhawk Adventures novel series that were in that setting, and then he branched it off and he came up with his own series on it that wasn't published by TSR. I don't know what happened there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I love those books. I ate those books up.
That's
and so
awesome.
I just totally ripped off that character. That was my most memorable one, only because it was just completely bit off of Gary Gygax's own.
It's easy to remember something you stole. Yeah.
Well, the next part. So I'm transitioning after this episode. I'm going to take a month or 2 off, and then I'm transitioning to a story which will be more of like a performance art thing based off of a Forgotten Realms campaign that we did.
Oh, cool.
All right, next question here. You guys will like this one. Which Holy Grail knight do you most identify with, or which is your favorite?
Am I first on this one?
Does it have to be the Monty Python Knights of the Holy Grail, or like actual?
Ooh, you're finding a loophole.
Knights of the Round Table, because there's a difference.
Yeah, well, I was is looking back at your podcast titles. That's what has inspired this question.
So we got to go Monty Python.
We got to go Monty Python. Absolutely.
Bedivere. I'm a huge Terry Jones fan, and so yeah, Sir Bedivere is hilarious. It's just.
Oh goodness!
Is that so? If she weighs the same as a duck,
he was like the smart one of the group.
Yes. Okay.
The scientist.
How do you know so much about swallows? That guy.
Sir Bedivere, right?
Yeah.
Sir Lancelot the Brave.
Oh, I knew it.
Sir Lancelot the Brave.
Yes. Storming the castle.
Oh yes, and of course, I just. The bridge. He gets the bridge question right. What is your favorite color? Blue. Yeah. Go on, off you go. Thank you very much. That's easy.
Oh, that's great.
Next time I see you running at me with a sword, Alan, I'll run away.
You'll have plenty of time to run away.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, last question. Last lightning round question. All right, and I think maybe you could probably talk for a little bit about this if you want. Right. Is there? Let's pretend you go to the Bodleian and you open up this chest that they had, and they say, "We just found this." Right? It's a whole bunch of other writings. Here's the question: Is there any particular lightly mentioned item or character from Tolkien that you would love to see a manuscript about?
Oh, okay. Look, I know I'm first on this one, and I'm almost wishing I wasn't. I know a lot of people would love to know more about Tom. I actually fully embrace the idea that, like Tolkien said, Tom is a mystery. Tom is an enigma. Great. Let's leave him that way.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. There's so much to the world of Middle Earth that we're just barely touched on, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What happened to the no man's land out in front of Mordor? What happened? What kind of weaponry did he use that just scorched the earth
It
for
destroyed
thousands of
the
years?
earth. Yeah.
What
Yeah.
what's going on in Rune or in Harad or in what happened to the Blue Wizards? What happened to the Entwives? Those are all super important questions. Yeah, God,
Pass. You can pass.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, if we answer any one of those, then we want to answer the rest.
Yeah.
I'm okay with it being where it is. Oh, that is a tough one.
Yeah, I know. I think that's a good answer, actually. I'm
Okay,
okay with it being where it is. I mean,
yeah,
it is.
I'd
It's
be
a
fine if it
beautiful.
was just more letters or more, more personal stuff, and nothing else about the mythology.
It is kind of perfect the way that it is.
It is. It's perfectly imperfect in the sense that
I
it's perfectly incomplete. Yeah.
I I guess the only thing that I would say that's a little different from that, and I know everybody's expecting me to say, "Oh, where's like a Lay of Arendelle poem or something like that,"
Oh well, yeah. Anything about
which
Arendelle, right?
which would be cool. But I think more than that, which ties in with Arendelle, is I would love to see. I would love to find more of the longer novel version of Tuor coming to Gondolin.
Yes,
Mm.
yes, I
You know,
would.
which is in
That's
Unfinished Tales as of Tuor and is coming to Gondolin, and
the full version.
it
Mm.
ends right when he gets to the city, and I would love to see
I want
the
that moment
fall
when
of Gondolin
yes,
played out. I'd love to see him meet Idril for the first time.
yes,
I'd love
Yeah.
to
that's
see
exactly
him
right. I was thinking the
the
same thing. Yeah.
full on Trojan War, like escaping the city with Idril and Eärendil. I would love to see that.
Mm.
Eärendil biting people. I want to see that. But
well, well, Idril's going to come back into this tonight too. We'll mention her as
All
well.
right. All right.
excellent.
So good answers, guys.
Okay.
None of those were meant to be gotcha questions.
Well, good questions. So
They
that's
were
why we
good
got good
questions.
answers.
All right, so let's we're going to go on to part 3 of this, and this is kind of the meat of this. And again, this is you do this so well. You read the text from Tolkien and you discuss it so well that really this is what inspired me to invite you guys on the last episode
Okay.
of this podcast. So we're going to talk about the second prophecy of Mondos, the Dagor Dagorath, the
Yes.
last
Oh,
battle. So I was wondering before we get into the text, what is your experience or your sort of opinion of the second prophecy of Mondos? Have you gotten a chance to talk with anyone about this on the
we
Prancing
actually
Pony?
haven't. No, we really haven't. And it's one of those things, I think we touched on it very briefly in season 1.
I don't really remember us getting into it too much, to
No,
be
I think
honest
we
with
only
you.
like mentioned that it existed. Maybe it was
Yeah.
at the Turin bit when we talked about that. I don't
Mm,
remember, but there hasn't been a moment to bring it up. And really, I don't know that there will be until we finish the Lord of the Rings and we do a season on like other stories in the Legendarium, when we'll bring in things from Unfinished Tales. We'll bring in some bits from more complete stories from the history of Middle Earth. We want to spend some time on the debate of Andreth and Finrod.
mhm.
There's other stories in there that we want to actually explore. And I think that might be a time when we'll talk about the Dagor Dagorath, because it is a
Mhm.
very popular thing. I think a lot of people know about it, even if they've never read it, because it's not long. They can
Right.
get
Yeah.
bits and pieces of it from online in various places and put the pieces together. But yeah, we haven't really touched on it on the show. So we're excited to look into this.
And I think that's partly because it is, by Christopher Tolkien's own admission, he sort of questions what his father really wanted to do with it before
That's
the
right.
end.
Mhm.
It the texts that we have of it primarily come from the first half of the history of Middle Earth, which is the stuff that was written earlier in Tolkien's life. It was when he was
Mhm.
just getting up to basically when he was writing The Hobbit, maybe right after that, but before he had really gotten into the Lord of the Rings. I think it's all. I think by 1951, Christopher said that his father had basically written it out of the story. That's actually in
Mhm.
Morgoth's Ring. He talks about the fact that my father had rejected the story at this point. At least that's
Right.
that's Christopher's interpretation of things, and it does come from an earlier phase of Tolkien's mythology when it was much more Germanic. So it's
Mhm.
got a very Ragnarok feel to it.
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
It's very much that sort of classic pagan end of the world myth.
Mhm.
And frankly, I think as Tolkien got older, he started to get a little bit more away from that, and he tried to bring the Legendarium more in line with with his beliefs as an older man. And so I think that that did kind of lead to him sort of distancing himself from it a little bit. I have to trust Christopher on whether he completely rejected it. I seriously doubt that Tolkien completely rejected anything ever.
Yeah.
That's the
I
thing. He
I,
very
I
rarely did that, right?
yeah, I learned that from Corey Olson. I think he never completely got rid of anything, and so maybe he would have come back to it someday. And I wish he would have, because it
Oh, I
is
do
such
too.
a cool story, as we're going to get into.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, if I could quote Verlin here. So
Sure.
Verlin Flieger and I talked about this a little bit at the end of her second episode on the podcast. And she said, if he brought it, I'm going to try to quote her here. I'm not going to do a good Verlin Flieger voice, so I won't even try. But if he brought it to an end, it would end, and there would be no more. His inspiration for this idea was the Volspa and Revelations,
Mhm.
and then she went on to say that both talk about a last battle that is going to happen, but not
Yeah.
that has already happened and now
Right.
everything is over. That would defeat the power of it, is what she
Mm.
said.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's spot on, and I think once again, Dr. Flieger says, in a few words what would take us much longer to say. But I think, I always feel like Tolkien, he really wanted the story to still be going on. You see in some of his letters how he talks about how, oh, well, maybe we're in the seventh age or we're in the sixth age right now. Like, he really wanted us to still be in that world.
Yeah.
And maybe that was part of it, is that, if he ended the mythology, then how does that connect to our world? It loses something, because
Right.
suddenly it's distanced from that. Whereas
Yeah.
if you don't have this in there, then you can still read Lord of the Rings, and you could say, well, yeah, this is from the Red Book of Westmarch. This is
Mhm.
a book from thousands of years ago in our world. And I think he
Yeah.
probably just wanted to keep that. Yeah.
Well, you quoted Flieger from when she was on your show. She also mentioned this in Splintered Light. She says this: Tolkien wrote that the Legendarium ends with a vision of the end of the world, its breaking and remaking, and the recovery of the Silmarilli and the light before the sun. It would be strange if he had not envisioned such an end, for the mythologies on which he draws most heavily, Judeo-Christian and Norse, both included remaking and renewal in surprisingly similar terms.
Hmm.
So, it does make sense that
Yeah.
he wouldn't have completely given up on it.
Yeah.
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 And I think he says something similar in Our Favorite Letter, doesn't he? He
He
actually
does.
says,
And Tolkien says in letter 131, this Legendarium ends with a vision of the end of the world, its breaking and remaking, and the recovery of the Silmarils and the light before the sun, after a final battle which owes, I suppose, more to the Norse vision of Ragnarok than to anything else, though it is not much like it.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
the thing is, this is why I don't think he gave that up, because that letter, you realize, letter 131, was written to Milton Waldman in 1951?
1951, which is right
Yeah.
around the same time that Christopher thought that he was getting rid
Giving
of
it
the
up.
idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think it's at this point a little tricky to assume that he did. I mean, I'm not going to fault Christopher. The man had a million decisions to make
Well,
as to what to
yeah.
include and not include. And I hold no grudges against him for what he
Clearly, he
decided.
had some reason for believing that his father had rejected it.
Right.
But again, I think the truth is much more complicated than that.
Maybe I can explain to you a little bit about how the characters in our story going through this learned of the second prophecy of Mandos. And of course, this is such a rich thing to build a Dungeons and Dragons campaign around. When we first started, of course, when they were low level, I wasn't even thinking about the last battle. But as we progressed through this world, it was an excuse for me to learn more about the Legendarium. And I really delved into going from sort of Middle Earth proper, I really delved into the Book of Lost Tales, when the characters went over to Erisea, and then of course later Aman. But this text, they discover, they didn't learn about the prophecy all in one place. I broke sort of I guess in 1937 there was the Quinta Silmarillion manuscript that it didn't obviously make it into the finished Silmarillion, but I broke it into 3 pieces and I kind of added a 4th piece. And if we could, maybe the best place to start with this would be to read a little bit of the text. Though this marks the end of the episode, the road goes ever on. Until next time, join us at longwinded.one and consider giving us a review on Apple Music, Spotify, or really whichever platform you choose.